You're watching First Business Morning News with Tom Hudson, Angela Miles, and John and Pete Nigerian with a trade of the day.
The business jet has come to represent the greed and indifference of some big company CEOs to their struggling businesses and the bad economy overall. But the business jet business says don't ground the entire industry. Ed Bolen is the CEO of the National Business Aviation Association. We spoke with him at a flight management and charter plane hangar just outside Chicago. So Ed, when you think of business jets, you don't necessarily think of a propeller type plane that you see here, but your sense is this is really more representative of planes that businesses use for corporate travel.
Well, the plane behind us is called a Beech King Air, and it's really kind of the workhorse of the business aviation aircraft fleet. It's a turbine engine with a propeller on front, so we call it a turboprop. It represents about half of the turbine airplanes in the United States are these types of turboprops. And then, of course, you move from the turboprop to a turbofan. That's what a lot of people call the business jet.
The Gulfstreams and the Challengers of the world. Do you understand the public outrage that seems to be there in the congressional outrage when we're seeing some of these executives of struggling, if not almost bankrupt companies, still use corporate jets for travel?
Well, I think what you're talking about is a stereotype that talks about big companies using an airplane inappropriately. And we've never said that every use of an airplane is appropriate. But what we think is that most uses of business airplanes are appropriate. Most companies do a very sophisticated analysis on each mission to determine whether or not the business airplane would make sense, a commercial airplane would make sense, a train or an automobile.
Stereotypical as it may be, when we see these embattled CEOs use corporate jets for what may be specious travel, it does provide a difficult environment for business aviation, doesn't it?
Well, business aviation is not well understood. The types of companies that use business aviation, 85% of those are small and mid-sized companies, and they're trying to do missions that can't be accomplished on the commercial airlines.
So when a company is approaching a decision about whether or not to use a corporate jet or a corporate plane for travel, and you look at the price of commercial airfares, do the cost-benefit analysis for us from a company's perspective.
They have to determine where they're going, whether or not they're going to do multiple sites in a single day, how many people are traveling, whether they want people to work or need people to work on proprietary company business en route. So they'll have to determine how long will people be out of the office, how many hotel rooms will be needed, what is the cost of commercial service, how long will it take. All of those factors go into doing an economic decision and a strategic decision about what's in the company's best interest.
What is a general cost or the beginning to look at a cost of using a corporate plane for business travel?
Well, you may be looking at on an airplane like this around $400 per hour, $500 per hour to operate the airplane. So you'll have to look at how many people are going to be on the trip.
That's the time in the air.
That's the time in the air. And so you'll have to compare that to the hours involved and the cost involved, whether it's rental cars, whether it's hotel rooms, whether it's ticket price. All of those things add up. And they also look at how many hours are people going to be out of the office and what does that cost.
To your point, you advocate it's a much more efficient way of travel and doing business, and to that we'll climb inside and take a look at some of the amenities inside.
Great. Terrific.
So Ed, here we are inside this Beechcraft King Air, an 8-seater. This is typical in your estimation of what a normal kind of business jet configuration would look like.
Very typical. What you have are faces, feet looking at each other, a table where people can work en route. Very common to have this because a lot of work is done on to travel.
What do you say to those CEOs that have been hauled in front of Congress and almost shamed for using jets for corporate purposes? What do you say to them?
Well, I think it's important that every CEO, every company be able to talk about why they have a business airplane and why they chose to use it on this specific mission.
Bolen represents companies that own and operate business planes, but actually flew commercial to Chicago for our interview. He says it was more cost-effective for him to fly between two major airports offering commercial service than to charter a flight.